Hello everyone, today we're going to be learning the jar design A330. And this is going to be time-stamped, chaptered, so you can skip ahead to a certain part that you might want to learn. So let's get started here. We're going to use the ground handling plugin, which I believe is complementary with the jar design aircraft. We want to come all the way over to the control panel, and this is how we're going to add our ground power and start our fueling. So we'll add the ground power just by clicking the plus there. It adds it, plugs it in. We'll add the chocks. Then we'll come down and we'll bring in some catering, a couple of loaders, and then a fuel truck so we can add fuel to the aircraft. Now, a lot of the procedures with this plane are very similar to the A330, so if you end up learning the A330 before the A320, you'll have no problem flying the A320 after learning this. So the fuel's connected and it brings up this window here, and this allows you to add the fuel. For each number you add, that is 1,000 kilograms. So we're carrying 61,000 kilograms today, so we're just going to put in 61. Now that the fuel has completed, to remove that menu, you're going to have to get rid of the fuel truck, so we'll just click the minus on the fuel. And that'll disconnect the truck. And then at this time, we can just get rid of the loaders and all that stuff. I just wanted to bring those up to show you guys. But we'll leave the ground power unit and the chocks. But yeah, that's how you remove that stuff. You just click minus. And that's how you load the fuel. To begin powering the aircraft, we're going to make sure the parking brake is set. The throttles are in the idle position. The engine master switches are off. And the engine start switch is on normal. Next, we'll come up to the overhead and we'll turn the batteries on, and you can see they have come on when you have more lights illuminate on the overhead panel. We have our external power here. We're going to turn those on. And then if you do not have ground power, you can start the APU. We are going to start the APU before engine start, but we're going to wait on that for now. And to do this check, we're just going to go from the bottom up, left to right, down the overhead panel. Start by checking the windshield wipers that they're off. You're not going to have to worry about any of these. They're going to be already set for you. We'll test the APU fire. And then up here we have the Air Data Inertial Reference System. And we're going to align these, move the switch on number 1 to nav. And you'll see on bat come on. Once it goes out, we'll turn on the number 2 on nav. And then we'll get the number 3. And you can go 1, 3 to 2, it doesn't matter. I just like to go 1 to 2 to 3. Now we'll come down, we'll turn the seatbelt signs on, the emergency exit lights to arm, standby compass, and you have the dome light over here if you need it. And you can also this time turn the navigation and logo light on if you wish. Probe heat, if it's cold outside, turn that on. It's our external power. And fuel pumps, we're going to leave those off for now as well. We can test the engine fire. Windshield wiper is off. I don't think the cargo smoke test works. And everything looks good here. We just have to turn the radio on, which we'll do down here on the center console. You have more lights over here. This one brightens up all the panels. So that's always a good one to have on. This is the TCAS system. You have another floodlight over here for the pedestal. And then we'll turn the radios on now. And you can do that with the switch there. And then this is your weather radar if you need that. But that's pretty much all the setup for now. We're going to get on to the CDU now. Next, we're going to program the CDU. So you can first go over to the menu, and this is your load and fuel. This is where you can adjust all your cargo and everything. If you're carrying a heavy load like we are, 61,000 kilograms of fuel, you definitely want to adjust the cargo because this plane is very easy to overload. So be mindful of that. Next, you have another option here for the ground handling, just like the one in the menu. This is where you can control the doors. You can call for pushback. This is the sound settings. I turn the first officer and captain off, and the avionics, sometimes this gets turned down, and then you won't hear the call out, so always check that. And if you get that annoying frames per second message at the bottom of your screen, this is also where you turn that off. So to get into the actual programming, we'll go to the initialization page. And we're going to enter our route. We're going from Manchester to San Francisco. We'll put that in there. If you have a company route, you can enter the title up at the top left. Enter our flight number. We are Thomas Cook 2849. Our cost index is 50. And today we're going to be cruising at flight level 360 with a temperature of -51. And then we can click Align IRS. And then to get to the next page, this works with either the right or left arrows or the up and down, depending on the page. Right now it's the right or left. You'll see that in the top right. And these values you can just click and it'll do it for you. Unless you have something else to enter in there, you can also do that, but those will enter themselves for you. And then we're done with that. We're going to come over to the flight plan page. So to begin, just click on the origin airport code. And you can start by selecting a runway. We're going to be taking 23 right and the Eclair departure. We have no transition, so we're just going to leave it at that. Click the flight plan button there, and then click insert, and that will put it in there. You do have one chance to erase it over there, so if you want to start over, you can do that. And now it added the departure waypoints for us. But we want to add the rest of our plans. So we'll click on the last waypoint, ECLAD, and we're going to an airway. So we're going to click Airways. And on the left here is where you enter the airway. The right is the waypoint. So our first airway is going to be UY53. To WAL. And then we have another airway we're going to from Wall, UL110. To Kelly. And then our next waypoint, we're going direct. So to do that, we're going to come back to the plan. We'll enter these. And again, find the last waypoint, which is Kelly. And then we'll just enter next waypoint since it's we're going direct there. I think the next few are direct. This was a good flight plan to show this because it has a mix of using airways and direct to different waypoints. So the next is also direct to Summit. We'll enter that. Over to YYW, Yankee Yankee Whiskey. Victor Bravo India. And now we're going to an airway from Victor Bravo India. And it's going to be J107 to HML. And we'll insert that. We have just a few more to go. So we started from HML. And we're going direct again to Mike Lima Sierra. Alright, and this is the last one to legs. It's going to be where we transition, and we'll insert that. We're not going to worry about the approach into San Francisco right now. We're still about 10 hours away. To do that, though, you would click KSFO, then arrival, and then enter the runway. But at this point, the runway could be anything by the time we get there. As, like I said, this is a very long flight, about 10 hours. But that is how you would do it. And with that, we have a route. Just make sure you don't have any discontinuities in between. It's okay to have one once you're getting close to landing, but if you don't have any right now, then you're good. Next, we're going to come over to the perf page. And if you see up here at the top right, we already have 23 right entered because we were plugging that in with the flight plan. Right here is the TO shift. We don't need to enter a value here. This is more for when there's changes in the runway. Maybe there's construction or something has changed the length of the runway, so you would enter a value there to compensate for that. We are going to enter our flap setting. The format for this is either 1 or 2 notches of flaps, whatever you're taking off with, slash up, and then your trim number. Ours is 3.9, but that's the format to plug that in. And then below here is the flex temp. Now, most of the time when you take off in an Airbus, you'll be doing a flex takeoff, which is 2 clicks up on the throttle. The other way is 3 clicks up, and that's toga, which is going to be full power. But a full power takeoff is not always required, so most of the time you're going to be doing a flex, which it derates the engines. It helps save the engine life to not use the max power when there's no need to do so. This is calculated off of the outside air temperature, the wind, the weight of the plane, the length of the runway, and the best way to go about it is probably get a A330 performance chart and find the number that way. We're going to be doing a toga takeoff today, so we're not going to enter a value. And these are where you enter the V speeds. You just click these and it'll fill them out for you. And then if you hit next phase, you have the climb, you have descent, and then approach. And this is the information you would enter at the airport you're arriving at. You can also fill it out with the info at the origin airport in case you have to come back to do an emergency land or something. Now, to check the plan to make sure everything is connected up the way we want it. We're going the direction we want. We move this knob over to plan. And then you'll see here on the map display, we can now move through each waypoint to make sure we're going exactly where we want to go. And this is a good thing to always check on to make sure you're just you're not breaking off the plan. Your plan may not have any discontinuities, but maybe one waypoint is not the waypoint you thought you were going to, and you start heading off in another direction. So always good to check, especially on a long route like this. Next, we're going to set our altitude. If you're on ATC, they'll probably clear you up to a certain altitude. Could be anything, really. But we don't have any ATC, so we're just going to go straight up to our cruise of 36,000 feet. But, you know, remaining on this schedule of altitudes for each waypoint. And then we're going to set our altimeter. 1017. Set on both sides. This is the landing system button. Then you have your speed and heading altitudes. These are a push and pull system to activate and deactivate the knobs. You have your auto throttle, autopilot 1 and 2, and then the approach button. And then you can switch this on your map display, different interfaces, waypoints, and NDBs. Terrain radar is located right here. These are your brakes, low, medium, and high for the auto brake system. Anti-skid is right over here. And the brake fan, should you need that. Now we'll prepare the engine for start. We'll turn all the fuel pumps on to make sure there's no lights displaying. Then we'll come down and we'll start the auxiliary power unit. You click the master switch, just wait a second, and then hit the start switch. And eventually this will switch from on to available, just like we saw on the external power button earlier. You can turn the beacon light on at this time, and the nav and the logo light, if you haven't already turned that on. Now that the auxiliary power is available, we will turn on the APU bleed. This button is crucial in starting the plane. If you do not turn this on, you will most likely not get an engine start. We can now disconnect the external power. We will also do so in the control panel. Just click the minus on the GPU, and now it's been disconnected from the aircraft. You can also remove the chocks at this time.
Turn connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Okay, we'll remove the parking brake.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
And the pushback will begin and we will start the engines. So to start, we'll come down to where the throttles are, turn the ignition on, and then the number 2 master switch all the way up. And you see the N1 climb. When the number 2 stabilizes, we are going to do the same thing for the number 1. Number 1 master switch all the way up. Once the engines have started, you can move the engine start switch back to normal.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Set the parking brake now that the push is complete.
Disconnecting tow. Stand
This
by.
time we'll turn the APU bleed off now that the engine has started. We can turn the runway turn-off lights on, the nav and logo light, and the taxi light. We'll leave the APU on until we take off. We have the hand signals and they are disconnecting. Now with all that done, the last thing we have to do before we begin the taxi is you'll see on your center display there, to the left of the landing gear, we have a few things to clear here. So for the spoilers, we're going to arm those. You can do so with the number 3 key. We're going to set our flaps to 2. And the auto brake over to max. And with that, everything is set up for departure. Alright, so we're taxiing over to runway 23 right. We're going to hold short here just for a moment and get the plane set up for the takeoff. So coming over to your overhead, you can turn the landing lights on, the strobe light, the wing light if it's not on, and you can turn your APU off. So the next thing to do would be to come down and turn the transponder on. And we're going to turn this from standby to on, and then we're going to turn this to TARA, which is Traffic Advisory, Resolution Advisory. And then down here you have a few options for how many feet above and below the aircraft scans. We're just going to leave it on all for the takeoff. And then to brief you on what's going to happen, like I said, we're going to use toga power for the takeoff today, but most of the time you're going to use flex. Now flex is 2 clicks, the toga is 3 clicks. And but with our weight today, with as much fuel as we're carrying in our cargo and packs, we're just going to use the toga. But
approaching
if
you are using
2,
flex
3,
at any point
right.
during the rollout, you can move it up to toga if you need to, and there are certain situations where that would be the case. But you always do have that option. So if you forget to enter the flex temp values, or you just don't know what you should put there, the safest bet would be to use the toga power, which you know, being a virtual aircraft here, we don't have to worry so much about prolonging the life of the engines.
On
So
runway
those
2,
are your
3,
options.
right.
Generally, you'll always be doing flex, but today we're going to demonstrate a toga powered takeoff. Alright, so we're ready for takeoff. Throttle up to about 50% and then place it in the flex or toga position. And you'll see on your primary flight display, the upper left, it'll show what mode you're taking off in. And also, prior to 1,000 feet AGL, we're going to move the throttle down into the climb position. So also you need to be ready for that. I'll show you the position once we get to that point. .100 knots.
V1.
Rotate. Positive climb gear up. Okay, we'll set the throttle to climb power. We'll hand fly it. If I haven't mentioned before, it's a lot easier to fly this aircraft with a stick, being these are side stick aircraft. If you have a yoke, you can do it. It's a little easier with a stick and a little more accurate, especially when it comes time to land, to have the sensitivity of a flight stick. I'm just going to line it up on the green line and set the autopilot 1. And from here, we're just going to climb up to 360. Like I said, if you're on ATC, they'll give you instructions on what altitudes to climb to. Now put the flaps up on the schedule. You should see 1 and then the S, meaning slats, and that would be the last notch. Once you approach that speed, then you bring up the last notch of flaps. You can turn the terrain radar on. You can turn it on for takeoff too, but you can put it on, maybe you don't need it for takeoff. Maybe you need it a little bit after takeoff, you can turn it on. So we're going to start leveling off at 5,000 feet. The next 2 waypoints have us at 5,000, and that is going to be our transition. So at that time, we're going to switch over to the standard mode. If you're in America, this will happen at 18,000 feet, but around the Manchester area, it's 5,000. Now ideally on the MCP, knowing you're going to have a couple of waypoints when you're leveled out at a certain altitude, it's best to probably set it to that altitude. So 5,000 instead of 36,000. But it's still okay. What it's doing is it's following every speed and altitude restriction on the CDU. So we've gotten through the points of 5,000, and now we're going to climb up to the next altitude. Now that we've passed 10,000 feet, we can turn the landing lights off, and the runway turnoff light can also come off. The strobe and the beacon and all those can stay on. And if you have ice, this is where the anti-ice system is at. If you don't have any, the aircraft will let you know that it's not detecting any. And if you do, it will tell you that it is detecting some, so at least you have some sort of warning if you do not have them on already. Now we're approaching our cruise altitude of 36,000 feet. You'll see it here level off. You also have this arrow that's usually more on the line, but we're zoomed in so far. But this blue arrow here lets you know at the point when you're going to reach your cruise altitude. And it does the same thing to tell you where the descent is, and I'll show you that a little bit later.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We are now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, and you may now move around the cabin. However, we always recommend to keep your seatbelt fastened while you are seated. You may now turn on your electronic devices such as calculators, CD players, and laptop.
Now that we're closer to the airport, we can prepare for the approach. So come over to the flight plan page and select the destination airport code, and then come over to arrival. And from here, you can select the runway. You can use the up and down arrows to go through the list. But we're going to be doing the ILS Approach for 28 right. And our arrival is going to be the Bodega 3. And legs will be our transition. So we'll click that, and as you can see, we have ILS 28 right, Bodega, and legs. And then we'll insert that into the flight plan. And you can see here we have the discontinuity between the plan and then the runway approach. And that's fine. We are going to vector around at that point. And what vectoring is, it's ATC will direct you around, or you can do it yourself if you don't have any ATC. So the next thing we want to set up is the approach page. You get here from the perf page, just move over a few pages. Our QNH is going to be 1005, temperature 47. Our wind is 274. Oh, it's about 3 knots. Transition altitude, now that we're in America, is going to be 18,000 feet. And then our DH is going to be 200. This will set your minimums. This is where you can set your landing config, 3 flaps or full. We're going to be doing the full flaps landing. And then here's your go-around speeds and that information. For the ILS, you want to come over to the nav radio page and make sure the correct frequency is in here, as well as the CRS. You can find these on the chart. Now we're beginning our descent. Legs is our transition, and the blue arrow there on the line represents when our descent is going to start taking place. As long as we initiate it, the Airbus does not do it for you like the Boeings do. Now this is our top of descent in the CDU, showing us where that is, and we can see it there. Now we're getting ready to actually reach the top of descent now, so now we're cleared down to 240, and we'll plug that in. And we're close enough so we can start it right now by right-clicking the knob. And then you will start to descend. And it'll fly this descent based on what you have in the CDU. It'll do its best to anyway. You might need some spoilers at certain points, so just make sure you keep track of that. Now we're about to cross 18,000 feet, so at that time, we're going to change our altimeter. Do that by right-clicking, and we're no longer in Europe, so we'll switch it. And we're going to go down to 2970 for our baro. Currently heading down to 11,000. We're going to cross over the airport, and then we're going to descend down to 3,000 feet, and then connect with the ILS over there. Okay, we're on a 300 heading to line up with the runway. This is the landing system button. And you'll see these pink diamonds appear here on the primary display. And when those start moving, we're going to engage the localizer button. Now we're moving closer to the path of the runway. Now as we get closer to the localizer, you're going to see the horizontal diamond move first. And there we have movement, so we'll engage the lock button. And what this will do is it'll line you up with the path of the runway. And then the next diamond we have is the vertical diamond, and that is going to control the glide down to the runway. You can also monitor it on this mode, the approach mode. We're going to now slow to 180 knots. About 10 miles out, we'll put the landing gear down, set the auto brake. We're going to go with the low. You can use low or medium backs, is usually not recommended. We'll set the ground spoilers, and now that we also have movement on the vertical diamond, we'll engage the approach button. And now it is going to hold you on this path, on the path lined up with the runway, and then the path down to the runway at the same time. We'll now slow to 170 knots. We have 1 notch of flaps. We're going to go full flaps, but not all at once. Now at this time you can activate the approach phase and then confirm it.
2,500.
And to do an auto land, you're going to follow the same procedures, just you're really not going to turn the autopilot off. That's pretty much how it's going to work. We engaged the autopilot 2 button. You can do that around this point. And then now we're going to slow to 150 knots. But yeah, that's why I'm not doing a separate section on the auto land, because it's really just this. It's just you don't turn the autopilot off. Now we're going to turn it off probably. I usually like to turn it off about 1,000 feet, but this is really not the greatest weather to do a landing demonstration, so I'm probably going to cut it at about 500 feet. We still do not have the runway in sight. So again, the flaps are full, the auto brake is set, the ground spoilers are armed, seatbelt signs are on. We have our go-around altitude set, and our speed is set. Right around this time I would cut the autopilot, but I didn't pick the best of days to demonstrate a landing, so I'm going to have the autopilot keep it stable as long as I can, and then I'll take over. And by this point, your display should look something like this. I didn't get this because I actually didn't do the full flight to San Francisco, the full 10 hours. I took off from San Francisco, but I made it the CDU think we started from Manchester. So I think because I went about it that way, I didn't get that screen to come up. But that is what you want. I did want to point that out, that the way I have it is not the correct way you would normally see it. It's just I think the plane thinks that we never took off from Manchester, so it's
400.
In hindsight, I should have picked a shorter route to demonstrate this.
300, 100 above. Minimum.
Landing.
$100. 50, 40, 30, 20. Retard.
Put the nose down and engage the reverse thrust. Make sure you get a better flare than I did. There's an art to it. There's a technique, but once you get it, it becomes easier to do. This weather was quite a challenge for a demonstration. So we got the brakes a little hot there, and that's fine. You can turn the brake fan on, which is a fun feature to use, and that it's simulated. So this caution is just about the brakes. So we'll turn that fan on. It'll cool them down pretty quick. Want to put the flaps up and the spoilers, runway turnoff lights, those stay on. I meant to hit the strobe, but I hit that. Runway turnoff lights stay on. The landing lights come off. And you can put the taxi light on.
Approaching 10 right.
Also turn the TCAS system off now that you're taxiing around the airport.
50, 40, 30, 20.
Like I said,
10,
just
5.
make sure you flare a little more than what I did here. But otherwise, that's really it. Also, you can turn the flight directors off, the LS button, the probe heat can come off, and the APU bleed can come on. If your brakes are cooled down, you can turn the fan off, and don't forget to turn the terrain radar off. So we're now going to pull up to our gate, and you can turn the taxi light and the runway turn-off lights off. Then we'll just move into the gate, do the shutdown, and then the secure. And most of this is coming off of the checklist provided by Jar Design, but there's a bunch of different checklists out there, different real-world ones, and all kinds of procedures you can do in different orders. Pretty much the same thing, but some of them may be in a different order or have you check different things. We'll set the parking brake. The engine master switch is off. For the secure, the beacon light can come off. All these lights can come on. If you're leaving the plane for a bit, the beacon light can stay on. Turn the compass light on, the center. And the seat belts in, the no smoking sign can come off. Then you can turn the fuel pumps off. And all the DEERS switches. You can turn the emergency exit lights off as well. The APU off. And then now we'll turn off the batteries. And that should shut everything down. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to check out another tutorial I did one for the Zibo Mod 737-800X, so be sure to check that out. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.